Title: The Day the Silence Broke. Hello, everyone. It is good to have you here with me today. I hope you are sitting comfortably, perhaps with a warm cup of coffee or tea in hand. We are going to talk about something difficult today. We are going to talk about family. You know, there is a saying we all grow up hearing. Blood is thicker than water. We are told that family comes first. That no matter what, you support your own. But what happens when that support only goes one way? What happens when keeping the peace actually means letting yourself be erased? There are decisions in life that we only understand fully when we look back at them. Moments where we stood at a crossroads, and we didn't realize until years later that the path we chose saved our lives. Or destroyed them. My name is Ava Monroe. I am 23 years old. And last week, my family showed me exactly what I am worth to them. It wasn't a shout, or a slap, or a dramatic fight. It was quieter than that. It was the sound of flushing water. Let me take you back to that hallway. It was a Tuesday evening. The house was quiet in that heavy, settled way houses get after dinner. I was standing outside my bedroom door, holding my passport. Just holding it. The little navy blue book felt heavy in my hand, but in a good way. Like it held weight. Like it held a promise. I had just finished packing for my graduation trip to Italy. Italy. Just saying the word made my chest feel lighter. I had been saving for this trip for an entire year. Every shift at the coffee shop, every skipped lunch, every dollar tucked away was for this. I could already see it in my mind. The gelato in Rome. The late nights walking through Venice, listening to the water lap against the stones. It wasn't just a vacation. It was the first thing in my life that was just for me. I was flipping the passport open and closed, smiling at my own picture. I looked so young in that photo. So hopeful. Then, the bathroom door opened. My sister, Megan, stepped out. Megan is 6 years older than me. She has always been the loud one. The one who takes up all the air in the room. She blocked my way in the narrow hallway. She didn't smile. She didn't say excuse me. She just stood there, staring at the passport in my hand. There was a look in her eyes that I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. It was calculation. Before I could even ask what she was doing, her hand shot out. She snatched the passport right out of my fingers. "Hey!" I said, reaching for it. "Give that back." She didn't run. She didn't laugh. She just turned around, walked back into the bathroom, and held the passport over the toilet bowl. I froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. We are sisters. People don't do that to each other. "Megan?" I whispered. She looked me right in the eye. And then, with a slow, terrifying calmness, she tore it. Right up. The sound was so loud in the quiet hallway. She tore it straight down the middle. The cover, the pages, the visa stamps. All of it. She dropped the pieces into the water. They floated there for a second, like scraps of junk mail. Like garbage. Then she pushed the handle. I watched the water swirl. I watched my face, cut in half, disappear down the drain. I watched my Rome, my Venice, my freedom, vanish with a gurgle. She turned back to me. She had this slow little smirk on her face. Not a happy smile. A satisfied one. "There is no trip," she said softly. "Your job is staying home with my kid." I stood there on the cold tile. I couldn't breathe. My suitcase was half-zipped in my room behind me. My flight was paid for. My dreams were packed. And she had just flushed them away because she needed a babysitter. From down the hall, my mother's voice drifted out of the living room. She didn't come to see what the noise was. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just called out, casual as anything. "Exactly, Ava. You should stay. Family comes first." Then, I heard laughter. A couple of chuckles from the living room. My dad. Megan's husband. Like everyone thought this was hilarious. Like destroying my property, my hard work, my joy, was just one big joke. "Oh, look at Ava," they were thinking. "She thinks she can leave us." I stood there, and I realized something that hit me harder than the loss of the money or the trip. To them, I wasn't a grown woman. I wasn't a person with dreams and plans. I was just free labor. I was the spare part. I was the thing they used to make their lives easier. I didn't cry. I think they expected me to cry. They expected me to beg. To say, "Please, Megan, why?" To fall apart so they could pat my head and say, There, it's for the best." But I didn't. Something inside me went very, very still. It was a cold feeling. A clear feeling. I looked at the empty toilet bowl. Then I looked at my sister. She was waiting for me to yell. She was ready for a fight she knew she would win because she always won. Instead, I turned around. I walked into my room. I grabbed my backpack. I put my wallet in it. I put my laptop in it. I walked back out into the hallway. "Where are you going?" Megan asked. Her voice had a little edge of confusion now. She hadn't expected silence. I didn't answer her. I walked past her. I walked past the living room where my parents were sitting, watching TV, oblivious to the fact that they had just broken the last thread holding me to them. I opened the front door. "Ava," my mom called out, finally sensing something was wrong. I stepped out into the night air. It was cool. It smelled like rain. I closed the door behind me. They thought that meant they had won. They thought that by destroying my passport, they had trapped me in that house forever. They thought they had clipped my wings. They had no idea. They had no idea that was the moment everything started to fall apart for them. Not for me. For them. If you have ever been told to throw away your dreams because of family. If you have ever been told that you are selfish for wanting a life of your own, you are going to want to hear how this ends. But to understand how we got to that toilet, and that flush, and that silence, you have to understand who I was before. You have to understand the girl who said yes to everything. And to do that, we have to go back a little bit. Back to before Italy was even an idea. Have you ever noticed how heavy things accumulate? You don't pick up a heavy load all at once. If someone handed you 100-pound weight, you would drop it. You would say, "No, I can't carry that." But that isn't how it happens. It happens like snow. One flake at a time. One small favor. One, just this once. One, since you are already home. And before you know it, you are buried. You are stuck under the weight of everyone else's needs, and you can't remember when you agreed to carry it all. That was my life before the passport went into the water. I am the younger sister. In many families, that comes with a label. The baby. The helper. The one who cleans up the mess. I had moved back home to our place in Chicago to finish my degree. It was supposed to be a smart financial move. Save on rent, focus on my studies, help my parents out a little around the house. It sounded like a good plan. A responsible plan. But my sister, Megan, she saw it differently. Megan is married with a 4-year-old son named Oliver. We all call him Ollie. He is a sweet boy, full of energy and sticky hands and loud noises. I love him. I really do. When Megan first had him, I thought I was just being a good aunt. I would watch him for an hour so she could nap. I would take him to the park on a Saturday morning so she and her husband, Ethan, could have a quiet coffee. It felt like the right thing to do. Sisters help sisters, right? But here and there slowly turned into every weekend. And every weekend turned into every Tuesday night. And then it became every time Megan wanted a break. Every time she had a headache. Every time she just didn't feel like being a mother that day. I became the path of least resistance. Megan would show up at the front door without calling. She would already be dressed for dinner, perfume on, hair done, wearing heels I couldn't afford. She would shove Ollie's backpack into my arms before I could even say hello. "You're home anyway," she would say, breezing past me. "It's not a big deal. You know how tired I am." If I tried to protest, if I said, "Megan, I have a paper due at midnight," or "I have an exam at 8 a.m., she would just roll her eyes. It was a specific roll, one that made me feel about 2 inches tall. "Do you think motherhood is easy?" she would ask. "Do you have any idea what it's like? You have it so easy, Ava. All you have to do is read books." She made my life, my education, my work, sound like a hobby. Like a vacation I was taking while she did the real work of living. And my parents? My mom, Linda, works nights as a nurse. My dad, Rob, used to drive trucks and now works dispatch. They have worked hard their whole lives. I respect that. But they are tired people. Most of the time, they were either gone or exhausted. It was easier for them to let me handle Megan. It was easier to let me be the buffer. If I took care of Ollie, Megan didn't complain to them. If I cancelled my plans, there was peace in the house. So, they convinced themselves I didn't mind. Or maybe they just didn't want to look too closely. The baby monitor on my desk became a permanent fixture. The diaper bag in the hallway was always there, like a piece of furniture we couldn't get rid of. The sound of cartoons playing in the living room became the soundtrack to my college years. I missed birthday dinners with friends. I skipped study groups. I canceled dates. I remember one specific night. I had a date with a guy from my history class. I had bought a new dress. I was actually excited. At 6 p.m., Megan texted. "Something came up. Can you watch him? I'll owe you." I tried to say no. I texted back, "I have plans." She called me immediately. "Plans? You're going to leave me stranded because you have a date? Family comes first, Ava." I canceled the date. I put on sweatpants. I watched Ollie. And Megan never told me what came up. I saw photos on Facebook the next day of her and Ethan at a concert. She didn't owe me. She owned me. It's a strange feeling, being a servant in your own home. You start to feel like a ghost. You are there, but your needs don't register. You are just a pair of hands to hold the baby. You are just a warm body to keep the house safe. Speaking of keeping the house safe, that brings me to something important. A couple of months before graduation, something happened on our block. A neighbor's house was broken into. It wasn't violent, just someone smashing a window and grabbing a TV, but it shook my dad up. He has always been a protective man in his own way. He decided we needed security. He went out and bought this cheap, do-it-yourself security camera system. He spent a whole weekend installing them. One on the porch, one facing the back door, and one in the hallway pointing toward the bedrooms and the bathroom. He was so proud of them. "Now we have eyes," he said. He set up the app on his phone, and then he set it up on mine. "Here," he joked, tossing my phone back to me. "Now you can spy on the dog while you're in class. Make sure nobody steals the couch." At the time, I didn't think much of it. It felt like just another thing. Another beep on my phone. Another little piece of control I didn't really own. I rarely checked it. Why would I? It just showed the empty hallway, the pile of shoes by the door, the life I was trying so desperately to escape. I didn't know then that those little plastic cameras were going to be the most important things in my life. I didn't know they were silently recording the evidence of my erasure. I just went on with my routine. Study. Class. Babysit. Repeat. I kept my head down. I told myself, just finish the degree. Just get to graduation. Then things will change. We tell ourselves that, don't we? Just get through this part, and the next part will be better. We think there is a finish line. But people like Megan, they don't believe in finish lines. They believe in moving the goalposts. Then, finally, graduation came. It was a bright, windy day in May. I walked across the stage. I shook the dean's hand. I took the pictures in my cap and gown. My friend Tessa screamed my name from the stand so loud I could hear it over the applause. For a few hours, I felt like myself. I wasn't Megan's sister. I wasn't Ollie's aunt. I was Ava. Ava Monroe, college graduate. After the ceremony, my family went home to get ready for a celebration dinner, but I stayed behind with my friends. We all ended up at this little coffee shop in Wrigleyville where we used to cram for exams. It smelled like roasted beans and rain. We huddled around a scratched-up wooden table, still in our nice clothes, drinking lukewarm coffee. And for the first time in a long time, the conversation wasn't about deadlines. It wasn't about babysitting schedules. My friend Tessa leaned back in her chair and sighed. I'm scared, she said. Once we start these jobs, is that it? Do we just work until we die? We'll never get a real break again. Jordan, another friend, laughed nervously. We need one last big memory, he said. Before we get stuck in offices. Before we get stuck in routines. And that was when the word slipped out of my mouth. I didn't plan it. It just fell out, like it had been waiting there for years. Italy. The table went quiet. I looked at them. I have always wanted to go, I said. Rome. Venice. The cliffs of Cinque Terre. My grandma left me that graduation money, and I've been saving everything from my part-time job. Instead of laughing, they leaned in. Something sparked in the air. That electric feeling of possibility. We opened our laptops. We started looking at flights. We found cheap Airbnbs. We did the math on napkins. If we eat cheap, Tessa said, her eyes wide, and if we share rooms, we can actually do this. By the time the sun went down, it was done. Our flights to Rome were booked for July. We had a tiny apartment reserved near a cobblestone street I couldn't even pronounce. For the first time in years, I had planned something that was just mine. No nap schedules. No last-minute texts. No guilt. I walked into my parents' house that night with my graduation cap still in my hand. I had this new, fragile idea of freedom blooming in my chest. I was ready to tell my family the good news. I honestly, truly thought they would be happy for me. I thought they would say, "Good for you, Ava." I was so naive. I had no idea that one simple sentence about a trip to Italy was about to light the fuse on everything. The night I told them about Italy was supposed to be a celebration. In my head, I had scripted it out. I imagined toasts. I imagined my mom saying, "Oh, Ava, take lots of pictures." I imagined my dad saying, "You've earned it, kid." It's funny how we project our own hearts onto other people. We assume they love us the way we love them. We assume they want our happiness just as much as we want theirs. My dad had fired up the grill in the backyard. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid drifted through the screen door. My mom had laid out the paper plates with the little graduation caps printed on them. She had made her potato salad. It was the standard Monroe family party setup. Megan and her husband, Ethan, showed up a little late. Megan looked tired, which was her default state, and Ethan looked like he was trying to be invisible. Ollie was bouncing on his hip, already sticky from whatever snack he had eaten in the car. "Auntie Ava!" Ollie screamed when he saw me. He ran over and hugged my legs. I picked him up. I smelled his baby shampoo and the dirt on his knees. I squeezed him tight. I loved that kid. I still do. But in that moment, holding him felt heavy. I didn't want to be Auntie Ava tonight. I wanted to be Ava the graduate. Ava the traveler. We ate burgers and corn on the cob at the patio table. My dad stood up, holding a plastic cup of iced tea. "To Ava," he said, his voice a little gruff with emotion. "I'm proud of you. Both my girls, you've turned out okay." We clinked cups. For a little while, it almost felt normal. It felt like a family. Then, we moved inside for cake. My mom set her phone up on the kitchen counter to record. She loves Facebook. She wanted the perfect family moment to share with her friends. She wanted the likes and the comments saying, "What a beautiful family you have, Linda." "Okay, everyone smile," she directed. "Ava, blow out the candle." I blew it out. Everyone clapped. When everyone settled down with their cake, my dad leaned back in his chair. "So," he asked, "what is next for you, kiddo? Job hunting? Resting?" That was my moment. I took a deep breath. I looked around the table. I saw my mom's expectant smile. I saw Megan scraping frosting off her piece. "Actually," I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice, "I have some big news. I'm going to Italy this summer." I paused for effect. Rome, then Venice, then down the coast. The girls and I booked it today. I waited for the wow. I waited for the smiles. There was a split second of silence. I saw Ethan look impressed. "Italy," he started to say. "That sounds." Then Megan's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Italy," she repeated. Her voice wasn't excited. It was flat. It sounded like I had just admitted to a crime. "Yes," I said, still trying to hold on to the joy. "In July. We found these cheap tickets and..." "July?" Megan cut me off. Her face tightened. "You're kidding, right?" My smile faltered. "No." "Why?" She put her fork down. She looked at my mom, then back at me. "Ava, that is when Ethan and I are going to Florida. We booked the condo 2 months ago." I stared at her. "Okay, have fun." "You don't get it," she snapped. "You are supposed to be here. With Ollie." The word hit me like a slap. Supposed. Not asked. Not requested. Supposed. "I didn't know you were going to Florida," I said, my voice getting quieter. "Nobody asked me to watch him. We didn't think we had to ask." Megan laughed, but it was a dry, angry sound. "You're always here. You're the one who is home. We planned this trip, Ava. Marriage needs time away. We need this break. You can go to Italy some other year." My stomach dropped. The cake in front of me suddenly looked nauseating. "I can't go some other year," I said. "I booked it. I paid for it. My friends paid for it." "So cancel it," Megan said. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Family comes first. I looked at my mom. I expected her to jump in. I expected her to say, "Megan, that's not fair. Ava has plans." Instead, my mom put her fork down and folded her arms. She had that look on her face. The peacekeeper look. Which really meant, do what your sister wants so she stops yelling. "Ava," my mom said gently, "your sister has been really stressed lately. They really need this vacation. Maybe you could push your trip back? September is nice in Europe." "I start my job search in September," I said. "Mom, I have rearranged my life around watching Ollie for 4 years. I have cancelled dates. I have stayed up all night finishing assignments because Megan dropped him off last minute. I am not canceling this. For once, this is about me." My mom's eyes narrowed. The gentleness evaporated. "That tone," she said quietly. "That is not how you talk to your family. You live here, Ava. You don't pay rent. We support you. The least you can do is support your sister when she needs you." I felt my face heat up. Shame and anger mixed together in my throat. "I don't pay rent," I said, my voice shaking, "because I am the live-in nanny. If you hired someone to do what I do, it would cost you a fortune." Megan leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "You are being selfish," she spat out. "Do you think it's easy raising a kid and working full-time? We don't get to just run off to Europe to drink wine. You are young. You have no responsibilities. Right now, your nephew needs you." Ethan shifted in his seat. He looked uncomfortable. "Megan," he murmured, "maybe we can find someone else." "No." Megan turned on him. "We can't afford a stranger, Ethan. And I don't trust a stranger. Ava is family. She does it." She turned back to me. "You are doing it." It wasn't a question. It was a command. My dad stared at his plate. He was moving his corn cob around with his thumb. He was hiding. He didn't want to deal with the conflict, so he was letting me take the fall. I looked at them. My mother, the nurse who cared for strangers but couldn't see her own daughter's exhaustion. My sister, who thought her life was the only one that mattered. My father, the silent ghost. I took a breath. And for the first time in 23 years, I didn't back down. "I am not doing it," I said clearly. The room went dead silent. The only sound was Ollie humming to himself in the living room, dragging a toy car across the floor. "I am going," I repeated. "I have already paid. I am leaving in July. You will have to find another solution this time." My mom's jaw clenched. "If you walk out on your family for some vacation," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "don't expect everyone to keep bending over backward for you." Bending over backward? I thought. Who is bending? But I didn't say that out loud. I just stood up. "I'm still going," I said. I picked up my plate, walked to the sink, and rinsed it off. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the porcelain. I walked out of the kitchen. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. My heart was pounding like a hammer. I felt sick. But underneath the sickness, there was something else. A tiny, terrifying spark. I had said no. I thought the fight was over. I thought they would be mad for a few days, give me the silent treatment, and then eventually figure out a plan B for their Florida trip. I was wrong. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. And because I had refused to play my part, because I had refused to be the good, obedient servant, they decided they had to force me. If I wouldn't stay out of loyalty, they would make sure I stayed out of necessity. Silence is a funny thing. We usually think of it as peaceful. We think of a quiet house as a happy house. But anyone who has lived in a troubled family knows the truth. Silence can be a weapon. It can be heavier than a scream. It can fill a room like smoke until you can barely breathe. For the 2 weeks after that dinner, my parents' house was silent. Megan stopped texting me. There were no surprise drop-offs. No last-minute demands for diapers or milk. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, and for the first time in years, it didn't buzz with her name. My mom was cool and polite. Hello, Ava. Good night, Ava. That was it. My dad stayed later at work, finding reasons to be at the dispatch office until the sun went down. Every time I walked into a room, conversation seemed to die mid-sentence. They would look down at their phones, or suddenly become very interested in the television. You would think that would have been a relief. I finally had my time back. I didn't have to watch Ollie. I could study. I could sleep. But it wasn't a relief. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm. You know that feeling? When the sky turns that bruised purple color and the wind stops, and the birds stop singing? You know something is coming. You just don't know where the lightning is going to strike. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself they were just mad, and that they would get over it. I told myself that once I was on that plane to Rome, once I sent them a picture of the Colosseum, they would realize I was serious. They would realize I was an adult, and we could start over. I was so hopeful. Looking back, should have known better. Megan wasn't the type to accept no as an answer. She never had been. If she stopped asking me with words, it wasn't because she had given up. It was because she was figuring out how to take the choice away from me completely. The day before my flight to Rome started out almost boring. It is funny to think about that now. It was such a normal Tuesday. I worked a short shift at the coffee shop near campus. I made cappuccinos. I wiped down tables. I served people who had no idea that my stomach was doing flips because I was about to leave the country for the first time in my life. My friends kept sending messages to our group chat. Links to Italian street food. TikTok videos of people riding gondolas. Tomorrow. Tessa texted. I can't believe it's tomorrow. Every time my phone buzzed in my apron pocket, I felt this little spark in my chest. A spark of pure, terrified excitement. After work, I rode the train home. I stared at my reflection in the dark window as the city blurred by. I tried to imagine myself as someone else. Someone who went on adventures. Someone who didn't exist just to serve others. I walked from the train station to my parents' house. The streetlights were just coming on. When I walked into the house, it was quiet. My mom was at the kitchen table, her reading glasses on, paying bills. She looked up when I entered. Hi, she said. Hi, I said. Just coming home to finish packing. She didn't look angry. She didn't look happy. She just looked busy. Okay, she said, turning back to her papers. In the living room, my dad was half asleep in his recliner in front of the TV. The 6 o'clock news was playing softly. The hallway smelled like laundry detergent and dinner. It felt normal. It felt safe. I let my guard down. I thought, we made it. We got through the awkward part. I am actually going. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. My suitcase was open on my bed. It was a mess of organized chaos. Clothes folded as neatly as I could manage. Chargers and adapters in the side pocket. A travel guide to Italy resting on top. I checked my email on my phone one last time. Flight status, on time. I smiled. I actually smiled. I walked over to my desk. In the top drawer, I kept a little zip pouch where I stored my important documents. My birth certificate. My social security card. And my passport. I reached in and took out the passport. I unzipped the pouch and touched the navy blue cover. The gold lettering felt rough under my thumb. United States of America. For a second, I just stood there. I wasn't in Chicago anymore. I was already there. I was drinking espresso in a piazza. I was free. I walked to the bathroom to grab a travel-sized toothpaste to toss into my toiletry bag. I held the passport in my left hand, afraid to put it down even for a second. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My hair was pulled back. I had dark circles under my eyes from weeks of stress and finals. But my eyes, they looked different. They looked awake. "You're doing it, Ava," I whispered to the mirror. I didn't hear her coming. The hallway had carpet. She must have been moving quietly. Or maybe I was just too lost in my own dream to notice the nightmare standing behind me. 1 second, I was flipping the passport open to look at my picture. The next, a hand shot past my shoulder. It was fast. Violent. The passport was ripped out of my fingers before I could even tighten my grip. I spun around, my heart jumping into my throat. "What are you?" Megan was standing there. She was blocking the doorway. She was wearing her coat, like she had just come in, or was just about to leave. Her face was blank. Not angry. Just empty. "Megan?" I said, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" "Give that back." I reached for it. She held it up high, just out of my reach. She was taller than me in her heels. "Making sure you remember your place," she said. Her voice was so calm. It chilled me to the bone. "Megan, stop playing around," I said, stepping forward. "My flight is tomorrow morning." "I know," she said. "That's why we have to do this now." And then, it happened. The moment that plays in my head in slow motion. She didn't just hold it. She bent the booklet back. She took the cover and the pages in both hands. And she tore it. The sound of the thick paper ripping was sickening. It sounded like a bone breaking. Rip. She tore it straight down the middle. My face, the numbers, the barcode. Ruined. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. "No!" I screamed. She turned around. She took 1 step toward the toilet. "Megan, don't." She looked at me. She looked right into my eyes. And she dropped the 2 halves of my life into the water. Plop. They floated there. Blue and white scraps. She reached out with one manicured finger and pressed the silver handle. Flush. The water roared. It swirled. It grabbed the paper. And just like that, it was gone. "There is no trip," she said quietly. That same little smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Your job is staying home with my kid." I heard my mom's voice from the hallway. "Exactly. You should stay. Family comes first." I stood frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I looked past Megan. I looked down the hallway. And there, high up on the wall, blinking its tiny, silent red light, was the cheap security camera my dad had installed. It was watching. It had seen the tear. It had seen the flush. It had seen the smirk. They thought they had just ended my journey. They thought they had trapped me. But as I looked at that little red light, a thought cut through the shock. A thought that was sharp and cold and absolutely final. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. There is a moment in every disaster where time seems to stop. The crash has happened. The glass has shattered. But the dust hasn't settled yet. I stood in that bathroom doorway, staring at the empty toilet bowl. The water was still refilling, making that hissing sound that is usually so mundane. Now, It sounded like a countdown. There is no trip, Megan repeated. She looked almost bored. As if destroying my property was just another chore on her to-do list, right between grocery shopping and picking up the dry cleaning. I looked at her. I looked at the face I had known my entire life. The sister who had taught me how to braid hair. The sister who had let me borrow her clothes for prom. And I realized I didn't know her at all. You know that is not your decision to make, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like a stranger's. Megan rolled her eyes. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. Grow up, Ava, she said. You live here. You don't pay rent. You eat our food. You use our electricity. You were never going to just walk away from your responsibilities. Now you don't have to pretend. I looked past her into the hallway. My mom was standing there, her arms crossed, nodding in agreement. She looked relieved. To her, the problem was solved. The disruption of my trip was gone. Order had been restored. Family comes first, my mom murmured again, like a prayer she didn't quite understand. I looked at the faint reflection of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked small. I looked pale. But inside, something had snapped. It wasn't a break. It was a release. The tether that had held me to them, the guilt, the obligation, the desperate need for their approval, it was gone. Flushed away with the blue paper. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I turned around, walked past them, and went into my bedroom. My suitcase lay open on the bed. The clothes I had folded so carefully. The dresses for Rome. The walking shoes for Venice. They looked like costumes for a play that had been cancelled. I left them there. I grabbed my backpack. I shoved my laptop inside. I threw in a charger, my wallet, and 2 changes of clothes. I didn't pack for a trip. I packed for an escape. I zipped the bag shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I walked out of the bedroom. I didn't look back. When I walked through the living room, my dad looked up from his chair. He looked confused, like he was waking up from a nap. Where are you going? He asked. Out, I said. Just out. Megan snorted from the kitchen doorway. You're not going anywhere without a passport, she called after me. Her voice was smug. Don't be dramatic, Ava. You'll be back for dinner. I didn't answer. I didn't stop. I stepped out onto the porch. The evening air hit my face, cool and damp. I closed the front door behind me. Click. That sound. The sound of the latch engaging. It felt final. I walked down the driveway. I walked down the street. I didn't run. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, putting distance between me and the house that had eaten my youth. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I wasn't staying in that house 1 second longer. What I didn't realize in that moment was that the same little camera my dad had installed, just in case, had caught everything. And that the thing they had used to box me in, the surveillance, the control, was about to become the thing that finally set me free. I walked to the bus stop at the end of the street. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I called Tessa. The second she heard my voice, she knew. What happened? She asked. I told her. I told her everything in one breathless rush. The bathroom. The tear. The flush. The smirk. There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy silence. Then she said, Ava. That is not just messed up. That is illegal. I know, I whispered. No, she said, her voice hard. I don't think you do know. That is federal property. She destroyed a government document. You are coming here. Now. She texted me her address again, even though I knew it by heart. I sat on the bus, clutching my backpack to my chest. I watched the city roll by. I replayed my sister's face over and over. Your job is staying home with my kid. When I got to Tessa's apartment, she didn't ask questions. She opened the door, pulled me inside, and locked it. She shoved a mug of hot tea into my hand and made me sit on her couch. Tell me again, she said. Slowly. I went through it again. When I got to the part about the hallway, and how my dad had installed the cameras, she stopped me. Wait, she said. Her eyes went wide. You have security cameras inside the house? Facing the bathroom? I blinked. Yeah. My dad put them in after the break-in down the street. He gave me the app access. Tessa stared at me. She looked like I had just handed her a winning lottery ticket. Can you access the footage right now? She asked. I think so, I said. Why? Ava, she said, leaning forward. Because your sister didn't just ruin your trip. She committed a crime. And you have it on tape. You don't just swallow this. You call the police. The word hung in the air. Police. Where I grew up, you didn't call the police on family. You kept it inside the four walls. You screamed, you cried, you forgave, and you repeated the cycle. Calling the police was the nuclear option. It was a betrayal. But then I heard my sister's voice in my head again. Grow up. You live here for free. You owe us. She had counted on my silence. She had banked on the fact that I was, good old Ava, the doormat. The one who would never cause a scene. Something inside me hardened. It felt like iron cooling. I took my phone out of my pocket. I opened the security app. I scrubbed back through the timeline. 6:15 p.m. 6:30 p.m. And there it was. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Me walking down the hall, happy, holding the blue book. Megan slipping in behind me, moving like a predator. The struggle in the doorway. Her hand going up. The tearing motion. The way she turned and dropped it. And then, the flush. Watching it on the small screen, removed from the moment, it looked different. It didn't look like a family squabble. It looked violent. It looked malicious. I saw myself standing there, frozen. I looked so small. Tessa watched over my shoulder. Oh my God, she whispered. She actually did it. She looks proud of herself. She was, I said. I looked at the phone. Then I looked at Tessa. If I do this, I said, there is no going back. They will never forgive me. Tessa took my hand. Ava, they flushed your future down a toilet because they wanted a free babysitter. They have already decided you don't matter. The question is, do you agree with them? I looked at the screen one last time. I saw the red light of the camera blinking in the corner of the recorded video. No, I said. I don't. I closed the app. I opened the keypad. Tessa put her hand over mine as I dialed. I didn't call 911. It wasn't an emergency. Nobody was dying. But something had been killed. I dialed the non-emergency number for the Chicago Police Department. Dispatch, can I help you? A voice asked. I took a deep breath. My name is Ava Monroe, I said. I need to report a crime. My passport was intentionally destroyed by a family member to prevent me from traveling. And I have security footage of the incident. The dispatcher paused. Did you say you have video evidence? Yes, I said. I do. Okay, the dispatcher said. Her tone shifted. It became professional. Serious. We will send an officer out to take a report. Where are you located? I gave them my parents' address. I told them I would meet the officer there. Hanging up the phone felt unreal. It felt like I was watching a movie of my own life. I have to go back, I said to Tessa. I'll go with you, she offered. No, I said. I need to do this alone. They need to see that it's me. That I'm the one doing it. I stood up. I put my backpack on. I felt heavier, but also stronger. I walked back out into the night. I wasn't the same girl who had run away an hour ago. That girl was a victim. The girl walking back to the house, she was a witness. And she was bringing the law with her. There is a specific kind of silence that happens when the police knock on your door. It isn't a peaceful silence. It is the sound of a neighborhood holding its breath. I walked up the driveway of my parents' house, but this time, I wasn't alone. A uniformed officer, Officer Miller, walked beside me. He was a tall man, calm and professional, with a face that had seen too many domestic disputes to be surprised by anything. My dad opened the door before we even knocked. He must have seen the cruiser pull up. He stood there in the doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel, his eyes wide and bewildered. Ava, he asked, looking from me to the officer. What on earth is going on? My mom appeared behind him, her face going pale when she saw the badge. Mr. Monroe, the officer said politely. I'm Officer Miller. Your daughter, Ava, has asked to file a report regarding the destruction of her passport. Do you mind if we step inside? My dad stepped back, stunned. We walked into the living room. The TV was still on, muttering quietly in the corner. Then Megan came down the stairs. She was wearing leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked comfortable. She looked safe. When she saw the officer standing on the rug, she froze. What is this? She demanded. She looked at me, and her lip curled. Some dramatic stunt because you are mad? I didn't answer her. I didn't owe her an answer anymore. Ma'am, Officer Miller said, turning to me. You said there was footage? Yes, I said. I took out my phone. I opened the app. I handed it to the officer. The room went deadly quiet. My dad, my mom, Megan, and the officer stood there. I pressed play. On the small screen, the scene played out again. The hallway. The ambush. The snatching of the book. The tearing. Riot. Even on the tiny speakers, the sound was sharp. Then, the flush. When the sound of the toilet flushing filled the living room, my dad shut his eyes tight, like someone had physically hit him. He turned his head away. The officer watched it twice. Then he handed the phone back to me and turned to my sister. Ma'am, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Do you deny that this is you in the video, destroying your sister's passport? Megan sputtered. Her confidence was starting to crack, but she tried to hold on to it. It was a joke, she said, her voice rising. She left it out where my kid could get it. I didn't realize it was a big deal. It's just paper. It is government property, the officer corrected her. And clearly, based on the video, it was intentional destruction. This is a federal document, ma'am. A report has to be filed. There may be charges. There will certainly be fines. He pulled out a notepad. I need your full name and identification. Megan looked at my dad, panic finally setting in. Dad? Are you going to let him do this? My dad didn't look at her. He was staring at the floor. The officer finished taking his notes. He handed me a card with a case number. You will need this to apply for a replacement, he told me. And Ms. Monroe, he looked at Megan, you will receive further notice regarding the charges. When the door closed behind the officer, the sound was louder than a gunshot. Nobody spoke for a long moment. My mom was trembling. Megan was staring at me with pure hatred. Then my dad cleared his throat. Get your coats, he said. Rob, my mom whispered. We are not doing this here, he said. His voice was shaking, but it was firm. We are going to the diner. Now. Call Ethan. Tell him to meet us there. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth at the 24-hour diner downtown. It was the kind of place with cracked vinyl seats and the smell of burnt coffee permanently etched into the walls. My dad had insisted on a public place. Maybe because he didn't trust himself not to yell. Maybe because he didn't want the neighbors to hear what was about to happen. Ethan, Megan's husband, rushed in still wearing his work clothes. He looked confused and tense. He slid into the booth next to Megan. What happened? He asked. Megan sounded hysterical on the phone. My dad set his hands flat on the table. He looked straight at my sister. I watched that video, he said softly. I watched it 3 times. Megan crossed her arms. Her eyes were shiny with tears, but she was still defiant. She was still trying to spin the story. I was stressed, she said. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just wanted her to understand. She can't just walk away from her responsibilities. I have worked my whole life to help this family, and now she thinks she is better than us because she is going to Italy. My mom stayed quiet, staring at her napkin, twisting it into a tight knot. Ethan looked from Megan, to me, to my dad. Responsibilities, my dad repeated. He tested the word, like it tasted sour. Your responsibility is your son, my dad said. Your job. Your marriage. Not your sister's entire life. He leaned forward. Destroying her passport? Dragging the police into our house? That is not stress, Megan. That is cruelty. That is selfishness. Megan's voice rose, shrill in the quiet diner. So what? She gets to run off to Europe while we scramble for child care, and I am the selfish one? She lives in your house for free. She owes this family. I finally spoke up. My voice was low. I was tired. I owe you 4 years of last-minute babysitting, I said. I owe you missed classes. I owe you canceled plans. I looked her in the eye. And you paid me back by flushing the first real thing I have ever done for myself. You didn't even ask me not to go. You just decided I couldn't. Ethan swallowed hard. He turned to his wife. You destroyed her passport, he asked quietly. On purpose? You told me it was an accident. You said she lost it. I didn't think they would take it so seriously. Megan cried. I didn't think it would go this far. It's just a passport. She can get another one. My dad shook his head. He looked older than I had ever seen him. With what money? He asked. She used her savings for this trip. Every dime. He paused. He looked at Megan, and then at Ethan. Your mother and I have been sending you $2,000 a month, he said. To help with your mortgage. To help with daycare. Do you remember where that money comes from? Megan frowned. From you, she said. For the baby. From the same pot that was supposed to help both of my daughters get started in life, my dad said. From the overtime shifts I worked. From the dispatch desk I sit at for 12 hours a day. He took a breath. And I just watched you flush your sister's future down the toilet because you couldn't handle being told, no, for the first time in your life. The diner went quiet. Even the waitress seemed to be avoiding our table. It stops today, my dad said. Megan blinked. What does? The money, he said. The support. The $2,000 a month. It's done. We are not paying your bills while you sabotage your own family. My mom looked up, startled. Rob. No, Linda, he said, cutting her off. Enough. We have enabled this. We let her treat Ava like a servant because it kept the peace. Well, look where the peace got us. The police are at our door. Megan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't just cut us off, she said, her voice trembling. We have a house. We have daycare. We have expenses. You have a job, my dad said. Or you did. Last I checked, you have a husband. You are not a helpless teenager, Megan. You are 30 years old. You chose to do what you did. Now you can choose to fix it. He turned to me. As for that money, he said. It is going to Ava now. For at least the next year. I stared at him, stunned. Dad. No arguments, he said. She is going to need a new passport. She is going to need new flight dates. And she is going to need a place to live that isn't full of people who think they own her. He looked at my mom, challenging her to disagree. She didn't. She just looked down at her hands. You didn't ask for this, Ava, my dad said to me. You didn't call the police on a whim. You did the only thing you could when your own family backed you into a corner. Let me do something right for once. Megan finally started to cry. It wasn't the fake, manipulative crying she usually did. This was the sound of reality crashing down. You are choosing her over me, she sobbed. After everything I've done? After giving you a grandson? My dad's voice was quiet, but final. I am choosing what is right, he said. And what is right is not rewarding you for flushing your sister's life away. I sat there in that booth, smelling the burnt coffee and the rain on my jacket. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than guilt. It was small. It was fragile. But it was real. It felt a little bit like justice. We often think of our actions as single events. You throw a stone into a pond, and it makes a splash. We focus on the splash. We forget about the ripples. The fallout from that night at the diner didn't hit all at once. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, grinding collapse. It came in waves, each one a little heavier than the last, washing away the foundation of the life my sister had built. The day after the confrontation, my dad took the morning off work. He drove me to the courthouse so I could get a certified copy of the police report. We sat in hard plastic chairs in a hallway that smelled of floor wax and old paper. We waited for a number to be called. It was a mundane setting for something that felt so heavy. When the clerk finally slid the papers across the counter, the stamp made a loud thud. I looked at the document. Seeing my name typed out next to words like victim and property damage felt strange. It made it real in a way that the video hadn't. This wasn't just a family spat anymore. This was the law. With the report in hand, we went to the passport agency downtown. The expedited service wasn't cheap, and the clerk warned me it might still take a few weeks. But as I handed over the paperwork, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. There was a path forward. On the drive home, the car was quiet. My dad stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, a city he had driven through 1,000 times in his truck. I should have stepped in sooner, he said suddenly. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the road. I let things go because I was tired. Because it was easier to let you handle her than to fight with her myself. And I am sorry, Ava. I looked at his hands on the steering wheel. They were rough, working hands. It's okay, Dad, I said. No, he said firmly. It's not. But I am going to try to make it okay. That was the first ripple. The shift in my father. The realization that peace at the cost of justice isn't really peace at all. The second ripple hit my sister a week later. Megan got her first official notice in the mail about the charges. She called my dad in a panic. I could hear her voice through the phone receiver from across the room, shrill and terrified. She was crying about how this was going to ruin her record. How it might show up on background checks. I only heard his side of the call, but his voice stayed steady. "You did this, Megan," he said. "We can't make it disappear. You need to get a lawyer and figure it out." He hung up. He didn't offer to pay for the lawyer. A few days later, the third ripple hit. And this was the one that truly knocked her over. Megan worked in middle management at a logistics firm. It was a corporate job, the kind that takes policy very seriously. Apparently, they ran periodic background checks on their staff, or maybe she had to disclose the pending charges. However it happened, the incident popped up. HR called her into a meeting. Ethan told me later that she tried to spin it. She tried to tell them it was a family misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. She tried to laugh it off. But corporate HR departments don't care about family dynamics. They care about liability. They care about judgment. And destruction of federal government property, and police report, are not things you can explain away with a smile. They gave her a choice. It wasn't really a choice. Resign quietly now, or be terminated when the internal investigation concluded. She came home that afternoon with a cardboard box full of office decorations, a framed photo of Ollie, a stapler, a coffee mug. She had a look on her face I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was shock. It was the look of someone who realizes the ground is not solid. Losing the $2,000 a month from my parents had already stretched them thin. Losing her salary on top of that? It was catastrophic. It was like yanking the tablecloth out from under a fully set dinner table. The dishes didn't just slide, they crashed. The mortgage stayed the same. The daycare costs stayed the same. The car payments stayed the same. Plus, now there were legal fees. Ethan picked up extra hours. He started taking side projects on weekends. But there is only so much one person can do to plug a hole in a sinking ship. You could feel the strain in the way he spoke. Shorter sentences. Longer silences. He looked gray with exhaustion. One night, about 3 weeks after the passport incident, Ethan showed up at my parents' house alone. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, filling out job applications. I heard a soft knock on the back door. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded. I made him coffee because that is what you do when you don't know what else to do. We sat across from each other at the same table where my mom had once lectured me about duty. "I didn't know," he said finally. He was staring into his black coffee. "I didn't know she did that to your passport. If I had known, I wouldn't have let it get this far." I looked at him. I believed him. Ethan was a passive man, but he wasn't a cruel one. "I know," I said gently. "But Ethan, you knew about everything else. You knew I was the free nanny for 4 years." He flinched. He nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "That is on me. I should have stepped in sooner, too. It was just easy. And Megan is very good at making you feel like you are the crazy one for saying no." He took a sip of coffee. His hand was shaking. "But this," he said. "The police. The charges. Losing her job. It is like she has doubled down. Instead of apologizing, she is angry. She keeps saying, if Ava hadn't called the cops, none of this would have happened. She blames you. She blames your dad. He looked up at me, and his eyes were full of tears. I don't know if I can do this forever, Ava, he whispered. I don't know if I can raise Ollie with someone who thinks destroying her own sister's life is acceptable as long as it gets her what she wants. I didn't tell him what to do. It wasn't my place. I just listened. A month later, the final ripple of that wave crashed down. Ethan moved out. He rented a small apartment closer to his office. They started a trial separation. The image that sticks with me is seeing my nephew, Ollie. He was splitting his time between them. I saw him one afternoon when my dad picked him up. He was dragging his little stuffed dinosaur by the tail, carrying a backpack that was too big for him. He was too young to understand custody schedules. He was too young to understand separation. He just knew that sometimes Daddy wasn't there at night. And sometimes Mommy was crying and yelling at the phone. While their life cracked and splintered, mine quietly started to take shape. The first transfer of $2,000 hit my bank account the Friday after the diner. My dad texted me a screenshot of the transfer. He added a simple message: remember, this is a reset, not a gift. Use it to get out. Use it to get ahead. I did exactly that. I found a tiny studio apartment in Lincoln Park. It wasn't fancy. It had a radiator that clanked in the night and a view of a brick wall. But it was clean. And it had a lock on the door that only I had the key to. The first night I slept there, I lay on an air mattress in the middle of the empty room. I listened to the distant traffic. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator. I didn't hear a baby monitor. I didn't hear my sister's voice demanding help. I didn't hear my mom's passive-aggressive sighs. I felt lonely, yes. But I also felt something else. I felt the immense, terrifying, beautiful weight of my own life finally resting in my own hands. I had lost my trip to Italy for now. But I had gained something much more valuable. I had escaped. My sister had tried to build a cage around me to keep me close. She wanted to make sure I couldn't leave. But in the end, she was the one trapped in the wreckage of the life she had built. And I was the one finally learning how to fly. When you tear down a house that was rotting, you are left with a lot of debris. But you are also left with a clear plot of land. You are left with space to build something new. As summer edged into fall, the leaves in Chicago started to turn that brilliant, burning gold. And my life, for the first time, began to turn with them. My days filled with new routines. They were small things, but they felt like victories. I woke up when my alarm went off, not when a toddler started crying. I made coffee for one. I rode the train to the loop, watching the city wake up around me. I wasn't Megan's sister or Ollie's aunt on that train. I was just another face in the crowd, heading toward a destination I had chosen. I had spent my first few weeks in the studio apartment frantically sending out portfolios. I had a degree in communications, but my resume was thin. It was mostly filled with freelance assistance, a polite way of saying I had spent 4 years running my sister's household. But then, a mid-sized advertising agency emailed me. They liked my writing samples. They wanted an interview. I remember walking into that glass-walled office building. I was wearing the only blazer I owned, which I had bought at a thrift store. I sat in a conference room, talking to a creative director about brand voice and storytelling. For an hour, the mess with my family didn't exist. The police report, the flushed passport, the screaming matches, they were all just static in the background. 2 days later, they offered me the job. Junior copywriter. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was entry-level. But when I saw my name on the company email signature, Ava Monroe, it felt like a flag being planted. It was proof that I had value outside of my family's needs. Then, the mail came. It was a Tuesday, almost 3 months after the incident in the bathroom. I opened my mailbox in the lobby of my building, and there it was. A priority envelope from the Department of State. I carried it upstairs to my apartment. I didn't open it right away. I set it on my kitchen counter and just looked at it. My hands were shaking, just a little. I tore the strip off the envelope. I slid the blue book out. It looked exactly like the old one. The same gold foil. The same crisp pages. But it felt heavier. I opened it to the photo page. There I was. A new photo, taken at a pharmacy downtown. I looked a little older in this one. My smile was a little tighter. But there was a steeliness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. I wasn't just a girl who wanted to go on a trip anymore. I was a woman who had fought for her right to leave. I snapped a picture of it and sent it to our group chat. "It's here," I typed. The replies came in instantly. Emojis, all caps, excitement. My friends had waited for me. We had pushed the trip back to October, risking the weather, just so I could get this sorted. "Pack your bags, Monroe," Tessa wrote. "We leave in 10 days. It finally felt real. But before I could leave, there was one more thing that changed. My relationship with my parents. Things at their house were quiet. With Megan dealing with her legal issues and the separation, the dynamic had shifted. My mom started calling me more often. Her voice was softer. She didn't ask for favors. She just asked how I was. One evening, she came to see my new apartment. She stood in the doorway, holding a grocery bag. She looked out of place in my building, surrounded by young professionals and loud music. "It's small," she said, looking around at my single room. "It's mine," I said. She nodded. She walked over to the kitchenette and set the bag down. It was full of cleaning supplies and snacks. Granola bars. Apples. The kind of things mothers buy when they want to be helpful but don't know how to say it. "I brought you some things," she said. "Thanks, Mom." She stood there, gripping the edge of the counter. She looked tired. The situation with Megan was taking a toll on her, too. "I'm not saying I was right," she said suddenly. She didn't look at me. She looked at a crack in the plaster on the wall. "I know I wasn't. I kept thinking about how tired your sister was. I remembered how hard it was when you girls were little, and your dad was always on the road. I projected that onto her. And I forgot that you were drowning, too." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the years of pressure. It didn't erase the fact that she had stood in the hallway and watched my passport go down the toilet. But it was honest. "You told me family comes first," I said quietly. But it felt like a threat, Mom. It felt like family comes first meant Ava comes last. She flinched. She looked at me then, her eyes wet. "I know," she whispered. "I should have protected you. I shouldn't have joined in." We stood there in the silence of my small room. "I'm going to Italy," I said. "In 10 days. She nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "For coffee," she said. "Or gelato. Just, enjoy yourself." I took the envelope. It was a peace offering. "Thank you," I said. Megan was a different story. She stayed away. Sometimes her name popped up on my phone with a missed call. Sometimes I would get a text at 11 p.m. "Can we talk?" I never meant for it to get this bad. Most of the time, I let the messages sit there. I wasn't ready. And honestly, she wasn't ready either. Every time I did reply, she would slip back into victimhood. She would talk about how hard her life was, how unfair the court system was, How lonely she was without Ethan. She was still waiting for me to fix it. She was still waiting for me to come back and be the buffer. I kept my replies short. I hope you are getting help, Megan. I hope you and Ethan can figure things out for Ollie. I didn't offer to babysit. I didn't offer to lend her money. I didn't offer to talk to Dad for her. Actions have consequences. She was living through hers. And for once, the consequences I was living through felt like choices. The night before my flight, I sat on my second-hand couch, my suitcase packed by the door. I looked around my little apartment. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. I thought about the girl who had stood in that bathroom 3 months ago, watching her dreams flush away. I wished I could go back and tell her that it was going to be okay. That the water didn't take everything. It only took the things that were holding her back. I turned off the lights. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. Tomorrow, I was going to Rome. And this time, nobody was going to stop me. There is a specific kind of fear that comes when you finally get what you wanted. You keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. You keep waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, "There has been a mistake. You aren't supposed to be here." 3 months later, I was standing in the security line at O'Hare International Airport. I had my new passport in my hand. I had my backpack on my shoulders. I was wearing comfortable shoes and a smile that I was trying very hard to keep steady. But inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs. Every time I heard a voice behind me, I flinched. I half expected to see Megan storming through the terminal. I half expected to see my mom running toward me, begging me to come back because someone was sick, or the car broke down, or family comes first. It is hard to unlearn the reflex of guilt. It is hard to stop feeling like a runaway when you have spent your whole life being the anchor. But nobody came. Tessa was waving at me from the front of the check-in queue. Jordan was already filming everything on his phone for his Instagram. Malik and Priya were arguing about who was going to fall asleep first on the plane. They were happy. They were light. And for the first time, I let myself join them. I stepped up to the counter. The airline agent smiled at me. She didn't know my history. She didn't know about the toilet or the police or the screaming matches. To her, I was just a passenger in seat 24A. "Passport, please," she said. I handed it over. My hand didn't shake this time. She scanned it. She typed something on her keyboard. She handed it back. "Have a wonderful trip, Ms. Monroe." I took the book back. I held it tight. "Thank you," I said. "I will." The flight to Rome was a blur of bad airplane movies, plastic trays of food, and nervous excitement. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent 8 hours staring out the window at the Atlantic Ocean, watching the world turn from black to blue. When the wheels touched down on the runway in Italy, I felt something shift in my chest. It wasn't just the landing gear locking into place. It was me. I had made it. We stepped out of the airport and into the humid, chaotic Italian air. It smelled like diesel and coffee and dust. I heard people speaking a language I didn't understand. I saw taxi drivers shouting and waving their arms. It was loud. It was messy. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't think about background checks or custody battles. We ate pasta in tiny restaurants where the menus were handwritten and there were no English translations. We got lost down narrow, winding streets in Venice until we stumbled onto a canal lit up like a postcard. We hiked along the cliffs in Cinque Terre, with the sea spread out below us like a sheet of blue glass that went on forever. There were moments, of course, where the old life tried to creep in. I would catch myself reaching for my phone out of habit, expecting a text. "Can you watch Ollie? I'm running late." I would feel a phantom vibration in my pocket. But when I looked at the screen, the messages weren't demands. There was a text from my dad. A picture of Ollie at the park, swinging on a swing set. "He is getting so big," the caption read. "Hope you are having fun." There was a blurry selfie from my coworkers back in Chicago, laughing about some inside joke at the office. There was nothing from Megan. And that silence, it didn't hurt anymore. It felt like peace. Nobody was trying to guilt me into coming home early. Nobody was telling me I was selfish for eating a second scoop of gelato. Nobody was telling me that my happiness was a burden to them. One afternoon, we were sitting on the Spanish Steps in Rome. The sun was setting, turning the whole city into a painting of orange and gold. My feet hurt from walking all day. My stomach was full of pizza. Tessa nudged me with her shoulder. She was licking a cone of pistachio gelato that was melting down her wrist. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. I knew what she was asking. She wasn't asking about the trip. She was asking about the cost of the trip. I thought about that bathroom back in Chicago. I thought about the sound of tearing paper. I thought about my mom's voice saying, "Family comes first," like a command instead of a comfort. I thought about Ollie, who hadn't asked for any of this. I thought about Megan, sitting in her house, finally having to face the consequences of her own choices without me there to cushion the fall. It is a heavy thing, to realize that you cannot save everyone. It is a heavy thing to realize that sometimes, saving yourself looks like betrayal to the people who are used to using you. I looked out over the rooftops of Rome. I watched a flock of birds circling the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. They looked so small, but so free. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I don't regret leaving." I took a breath of the warm evening air. I only regret that I didn't say no sooner. That was the truth of it. We spend so much time afraid of what will happen if we set a boundary. We think the world will end. We think our families will crumble. But sitting there, thousands of miles away, I realized the world hadn't ended. The sun was still setting. The people around me were still laughing. My family was still there, messy and broken, but still standing. They didn't need me to hold them up. They just wanted me to. And there is a big difference between being needed and being used. I finished my gelato. I wiped my hands on a napkin. "Come on," I said to Tessa, standing up. "I want to throw a coin in the fountain." "What are you going to wish for?" she asked. I smiled. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to wish for escape. I didn't have to wish for a different life. "I'm not going to wish for anything," I said. "I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you for the courage to walk away. Thank you for the camera that saw the truth. Thank you for the blue book that got flushed, because it forced me to get a new one. And that new one, it didn't just have a new photo. It had a new story." When I got back to Chicago, the city felt different. It looked the same. The gray skyline, the busy streets, the wind cutting off the lake. But it felt different because I was different. Usually, coming home from a trip feels like a letdown. You drag your suitcase through the door, you see the pile of mail, you see the dust on the shelves, and the magic of the vacation evaporates. You feel the weight of your real life settling back onto your shoulders. But this time, walking up the stairs to my studio apartment, I didn't feel heavy. I unlocked the door. The air inside was stale, smelling faintly of the books I had left on the desk. My plant in the corner was a little droopy, but alive. I dropped my suitcase. I didn't feel like I was sneaking back into a cage. I felt like I was returning to my fortress. My studio was small. My bank account, after 2 weeks in Italy, was far from impressive. My job was demanding. But it was mine. I unpacked slowly. I put my dirty clothes in the hamper. I put my new passport back in the drawer, not hidden in a zip pouch this time, but right there, next to my lease. A few days later, my mom came over for dinner. She didn't bring laundry for me to do. She didn't bring a list of grievances from Megan. She brought a lasagna. We sat at my small round table, eating off mismatched plates. I told her stories about Rome. I showed her pictures of the canals in Venice. She listened. She really listened. There was a kind of quiet pride in her eyes. It was new. It wasn't the pride of a parent showing off a trophy. It was the respect of one woman looking at another. "You look happy, Ava," she said. "I am," I said. My dad called later that night. He asked to see the passport stamp. He joked that maybe one day, when he retires, he would get on a plane, too. "You should, Dad," I told him. "The world is bigger than the dispatch office." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe." He didn't mention Megan. We were all learning to navigate the new landscape. The silence around her name wasn't angry anymore, it was just careful. Like walking around a bruise that is still healing. Then, the text came. It was a Tuesday evening. I was washing dishes. My phone buzzed on the counter. I dried my hands and looked at the screen. Megan. My stomach gave a little involuntary squeeze. Old habits die hard. I expected a demand. I expected an accusation. I opened the message. There were no words at first. Just a picture. It was a photo of Ollie. He was sitting at their kitchen table, holding up a piece of construction paper. On it, drawn in wobbly crayon, was a blue airplane. And scribbled above it, in his messy 4-year-old handwriting, was my name. Ava. Below the picture, Megan had written just 3 words. "He misses you." I stared at the screen for a long time. I could have ignored it. I could have blocked her number. After the police, after the fired job, after the separation. I had every right to cut her out completely. But I looked at Ollie's face in the photo. I looked at the blue plane. The anger wasn't gone, not entirely. But the fear was. And when the fear is gone, you can start to see things clearly. I saw a sister who was struggling. I saw a mother who was trying, in her own clumsy, broken way, to reach across the gap she had created. I typed a reply. I didn't say, "It's okay." I didn't say, "I'll come over tomorrow." I wrote, "I miss him, too. I am open to seeing him." I paused. Then I added the part that the old Ava never would have written. "But I won't be your built-in babysitter again. If we are going to have a relationship, Megan, it has to be one where you respect my boundaries. I am your sister, not your staff." I hit send. I held my breath. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, a simple reply came back. "I know. I'm working on it." It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a Hallmark movie ending where everyone hugs and cries and forgets the past. It was messy. It was tentative. I don't know exactly what our relationship will look like in 5 years. Or 10. Maybe we will rebuild something healthier. Maybe we will always keep a little distance between us, like a safety rail. But I do know this. Family is not a free pass to break you. We are taught that love means sacrifice. And that is true. But there is a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them use you until there is nothing left. Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to flush your future down the toilet and call it loyalty. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself, and even for them, is to say no. And mean it. Because when you stop letting people walk all over you, You give them a chance to learn how to walk on their own. And you give yourself a chance to see just how far you can go. If you are listening to this, and you have been told that choosing your own life makes you selfish, hear me clearly. You are allowed to have dreams that don't revolve around other people's comfort. You are allowed to set boundaries and keep them, even when it makes people angry. Especially when it makes them angry. And if the only way someone knows how to keep you close is by cutting your wings, maybe the bravest thing you can do is step back, rebuild, and learn to fly anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, or if you have ever had to make a hard choice to save yourself, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. We are all just figuring this out, one step at a time. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.